And we're good to go.
Okay, guys, this is an episode of the Nutritional Science Watchdog and me, the Keto Mechanic, together in one shot. This is what you guys have been waiting for. So here it is. I am the Keto Mechanic. I've been doing this since I'm 17 years old. I've got several social media outlooks where you can find me: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, that kind of deal. Been doing this for a long time, but I really appreciate where Bart comes from. And I asked him if we could do this together. And I just want you guys to hear what he has to say. So here's a little bit of Bart. Can you talk about yourself?
Yeah, great. First of all, Richard, look, I've been looking forward to doing this for quite some time as well. Richard and I have been acquainted for some time electronically through various Facebook groups that we both used to be in, and maybe we'll be again in the future, apparently. They want us back. We were agitators, so they decided we probably shouldn't be in their group. And now, anyway, now that we've both got a profile, suddenly they want us. Anyway, that's another story. We'll look at that another day. Obviously, I come from a position of having been in academia for about 17 years, teaching physiology, nutrition, exercise performance at the elite level. You know, I've dealt with groups of individuals like the New Zealand All Blacks, the rugby team, the rugby league referees over in Australia, and I've also done quite a bit of work with SAS soldiers here in New Zealand. And the New Zealand SAS is one of the most feared SASs in the world, boys and girls. Nobody wants to mess with the New Zealand SAS. They are, while we've got a very small force at large, nobody wants to mess with our SAS, and that's because of their preparedness to get their hands dirty, I guess. And I've also done some work with the Australian Army as well, in terms of just, getting these guys ready for what it is they have to be able to do. So that's where I come from. I've been a devotee, I guess, of ketogenic lifestyles now for more than 20 years. And most recently, I've been a fairly strict, not completely strict, but a fairly strict carnivore for about 5 months. And it's actually that's 10% of the health, getting from sort of 90 up to close to 100% health. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's kind of where we're going today, with talking about a few things that Richard suggested would be good topics. And we're going to talk a little bit about Dr. Shawn Baker. And by the way, congratulations, Shawn, on getting your medical license back, which you should never have lost in the first place. It's a shame for us here on YouTube, because it means he's going to be less present, or sort of almost not present here anymore. He needs to focus on his medical practice, and good for him. So that's a great thing. And then also, Richard suggested we might talk a little bit about the amount of calories that people are eating. Are people eating enough calories? Are they eating too many calories? What's the situation there? So we can kind of cover that a bit. And then anything else that kind of comes up in chit chat after that, really. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at.
Sounds good.
So we want to kick off with the Shawn Baker stuff, or?
Yeah, I have people often, they're asking me. The other day, RC, she's a commenter on mine and your channel often. She follows me and you a lot. And she said, what do you think about Shawn Baker and his diabetic results? And I said, you know what? Shawn is an animal. He's a powerhouse. He's an athlete. He does things that most humans cannot do. So if you look at how he lives his life and how healthy he is, can we really take his lab panels, his A1C, all this other stuff, and can we hold it against the man? The guy is he's an athlete, and he's learned to perform in that state for long periods of time without it showing to affect his health. So my question would be, in every situation, am I supposed to look at somebody and say, well, you look like you've got the perfect body. All your other lab panels are perfectly fine. Your lipids are perfectly fine. But whenever I look at your testosterone and your A1C, well, you just look like you're a diabetic. I mean, it's obviously this man is not in a diabetic state. And people want us to talk about that. What do we think when it comes to that?
Yeah. So my take on it, Richard, is quite simple, and obviously I agree with you absolutely down to the ground. Basically, what it boils down to is that there are a number of threshold medical tests that exist out there, and any one of these tests taken in isolation can be misinterpreted. The human body is a very complex, multifaceted machine. Even when you forget about the differences in performance and training status between one human being and another one, and you've alluded to it, the difference in training between us and Shawn Baker, for example, is massive. The man is a world record holder on the concept rowing machine. He's fit beyond fit. And he is also an outlier in that he has eaten a strict carnivore diet for, quite a significant period of time. And all of these things do affect his genes, because your genes will react to the environment in which they find themselves from time to time, and they will provide for what's going on in the best way. Your genes know what you're doing, is basically what I'm saying. They've been around for at least 3.8 billion years. All the genes that we've got have survived the selection pressures that have been placed upon them. We have the best collection of genes that is possible, on the basis of all the inputs and outputs over those 3,800 million years of evolution. It's a very, very long time, basically. So yeah, these n equals 1 observations on one given individual, meaningless, worthless, unscientific, to try and diagnose that one individual of any sort of pathological situation. Actually, the medical profession even doesn't accept the result of just one test. There is a bunch of criteria that would need to be satisfied before we could say Shawn Baker is diabetic, or Shawn Baker is pre-diabetic, or Shawn Baker is not diabetic even. And none of the results that we have seen published online by Shawn Baker provide us with sufficient information to be able to meet any of those criteria to say he either is or is not. So those in that vegan fraternity who have been pushing that idea for months and months and months now, so, oh, Shawn Baker's pre-diabetic, or Shawn Baker's diabetic. Okay, no. There's never been enough information to make that call supplied by Shawn Baker, and he would have known that. Actually, he's a medically trained surgeon. He knows what the criteria are, and in fact, although he hasn't given enough information, he's given plenty of inference there to say, okay, this is one of my numbers, my resting blood glucose number. He's also given an A1C number, which I'll talk about a bit. But he's offset that with some insulin numbers and a HOMA-IR number as well. And all of this leads us to kind of to a fairly clear picture of what's probably going on. In fact, if we're going to make an educated guess, rather than some ridiculous sweeping statement on the basis of somebody's agenda. Okay, they want to desperately try and find anything that will discredit people who want to talk about ketogenic diets, carnivorous diets, etc. For example, on Thursday afternoon, I was working underneath a piece of machinery in the factory where there was an overhead hazard. I stood up quickly. I injured my scalp, which you can see a tiny little hole there. And ever since then, I've done 3 or 4 videos over the weekend, and the vegetarians and the vegans have been saying, "Oh, liver spot." No, it's a scab because I cut my head open on a piece of machinery. These people are desperate. They will grab at absolutely anything to try and discredit. Another discussion I had online with a character on Gary Vegan Carburetor's channel after the discussion I had with him the other day. God, was that a train wreck. This person was trying to discredit me because I have a distributorship for a nutraceutical product which has some plant material in it. And I'm like, actually, yes, I've never said I don't have a distributorship. I do. The reason I have that is for my own personal use, so I can get it at cost. I don't actually market the thing particularly. Sure, I've got a video that promotes it on my channel. You can have a look at that if you like. So can anybody else. I'm not hiding it, but neither am I pushing this thing or trying to sell the stuff. Yes, it's got some plant matter in it. I never said I don't eat any plant matter. I said I'm basically a carnivore. I'm about a 98% carnivore, and that's, you know, I say that because it's about what it is. From week to week, not so good, but there you go. Yeah, so they'll latch onto anything is what I'm saying, Richard, and that's where we're going with this one. So one of the criteria for diagnosing someone as diabetic is that they need to have repeated fasting blood glucose assessments done on separate days and separated probably by several weeks ideally, that both need to be above 126 is the number that they look for. Now, what Shawn Baker has published is a single reading at 127. Okay, and that's what the vegans have latched onto. Oh, he's diabetic because he's over 126. Well, no, because you need repeated readings over 126, not just one. You know, the fasting glucose level is taken in the morning because that's generally when someone's most likely to have undergone the required 12 to 18-hour fast. Good luck getting an 18-hour fast out of some people in society these days, but there you go. They say, okay, at least 12. Now, there's a thing called the morning effect. It's basically a blue light in the morning effect. It's your body basically is programmed as you wake up, as the sun comes up, to dump some glucose into your bloodstream. It's a normal thing. Most people's muscle cells will grab that glucose and use it in the morning because there has been a shortage of blood glucose because of the insulin response the night before, because of the meal they had at dinner the night before. You know, this is how this works. The brain keeps doing this because it's a light mediated thing. It's not a glucose mediated thing. It's not a supply mediated thing. This is an automatic, you know, we will dump some sugar in the morning thing. Obviously, the keto adapted and fat adapted, meat adapted individual does not need that glucose in the morning because of a thing called the Randall Cycle, which you will find out a lot more about on my Patreon channel. If you'd like to go and have a look at that, we'll link it down under here afterwards. Basically, those muscle cells, the glucose uptake mechanism is locked out, in other words, or it's turned right down is probably a better term for it. These people don't need that glucose, so it doesn't get withdrawn out of the blood, so it sits there and pools there. So Shawn gets up in the morning, perfectly healthy. The light shines on his body, in his eyes, on his skin. That causes him to dump sugar into his bloodstream, which he does. His muscles would normally grab that, but they don't need it, so they don't. So it sits there. So he gets to the doctor's office, draws the blood. They go and test it and say, hey, presto, you've got elevated blood glucose, which is true. He did at that time of the day. Obviously, it stabilizes during the day. If you were to trace his blood glucose over the whole 24 hours, you wouldn't be concerned. You'd say, okay, there's a spike in the morning. Well, guess what? So does everybody else. So that's a normal thing. No real issues there at all with that one. The main points that he made, quite rightly so, was that his insulin level was at 2.6, which means basically there isn't an insulin resistant issue there, a chronic insulin resistance. What he's got is a short-term or adaptive insulin resistance, which is mediated, as I said, by the Randall Cycle. R-A-N-D-L-E, the Randall Cycle, if you want to look it up. If you don't want to go and look on my Patreon, that's fine, you know, whatever. Yeah, so there's no insulin resistance issue going on there. There's another thing called the HOMA-IR score, which is an insulin resistance score that you can work out on the basis of the ratios between various different things. Again, his came out at 0.8, which shows that he's very, very insulin sensitive, which you would expect for a high-level athlete. So again, that's in line with what we would expect. There is no sign of pathology that you would normally see with elevated or chronically elevated blood glucose and pre-diabetes and diabetes. taken overall, the whole picture is that the whole idea that Shawn Baker is pre-diabetic or is diabetic or shows any signs of being any of those things is utterly, patently wrong, ridiculous, nonsensical, desperate garbage, basically, by the veg-tards. So I hope that puts that one to bed, and that's my take on that one. Anything you want to add on that, Richard, or any other thoughts on the whole Shawn Baker stuff? Or
I just think that too many people get concerned with somebody else's life and they want to latch onto it, like these vegans that constantly want to attack him because they don't have anything else to go off of. They don't have anything else to point at the carnivore community because there's nothing to point out. So the fact that someone is a top-level athlete, it shows some kind of inconsistencies with what medical says it's supposed to happen or supposed to show. They don't take into consideration the lifestyle that he lives and realize obviously something's not right here. I mean, there is some kind of common sense that has to be involved in this, and it just seems like they don't have that. They're lacking that. And I think people just need to move on from the whole Shawn Baker lab thing and just realize there are so many other, like me. I consume anywhere between 3.5 to 5 pounds plus of meat per day, and my glucose is always 84, 82, 79, 88. I don't. My A1C is 5.1. I mean, my triglycerides are 52. My HDL is 60. My LDL is 100. Look at me. I mean, what's the problem there? And I don't have an issue with any of this stuff. Shawn is just a completely different beast, and we just need to move on from that.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And I think well said. I don't think I could add too much more. I mean, the only other things I could talk about would be things like, his CRP, his C-reactive protein level, which is an indication that he may or may not be suffering from systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation is going to be in place for someone who is chronically hypoglycemic. Shawn's CRP was 0.6, which is basically through the floor. No inflammation there at all. His triglycerides are right down there at 54, no problem. His triglyceride to HDL ratio, 0.2, no problems at all there. And they're all, good metrics. The thing you did bring up there was the A1C. I did forget to talk about that, so we can cover that one real briefly. One of the things that the vegans are now latching onto with people on ketogenic and even more so actually on the carnivore diet is elevated A1C levels. They go, oh yes, look, your HbA1c level goes up on a carnivore diet. That means you've got poor blood glucose control over the last 3 months, they say. Well, again, what we need to do is look at some of the science here and some of the inferences and go, okay, what is an A1C test? It's a measure of how glycated your red blood cells are. It makes some assumptions. It assumes that the lifespan of your red blood cells is around about 3 months. Now, that's an average value. And the longer a red blood cell floats around in your circulation, the more damaged it becomes by the sugar in your blood. And obviously, if you've got more sugar in your blood more of the time over 3 months, then that red blood cell is going to have more glycative damage. So your A1C reading will go up, and the medical professional will say, there's a sign that your blood glucose control is poor. Unfortunately, what it fails to think about is, hey, maybe a red blood cell doesn't live 3 months. Maybe it lives longer than that, and that would achieve the same thing. Not with higher levels of blood glucose, but being exposed to lower levels for a longer period of time, same deal. Now, there are a number of reasons to suspect. Now, the data is not in on this yet. The research is not in yet, but it's being done as we speak. So, watch the space. And there are a number of reasons to suspect that carnivores can expect their red blood cells to live longer than those who are on omnivorous and indeed on vegetative diets. So what we're saying is the A1C test is not valid in the case of carnivores, most likely, because most likely the assumption that the carnivorous red blood cells live for 3 months in the same way that everybody else's does may well be false. Their red blood cells probably last longer. So there's a problem for your A1C. So we need to do some research on that to get an answer, rather than continuing to assume that one single test by itself will give us an indication that is valid and correct for all people. Probably not. I mean, even look at like groups of individuals like the Inuit, or what most people will call Eskimos. They eat basically no carbohydrates year round because there isn't any to have. And their blood glucose, generally, their resting blood glucose comes out at 120, just below Shawn Baker's. I wonder why. Maybe because of the Randall Cycle, which you might want to go and check out on my Patreon, or you might want to go and look it up for yourself if you want to try and interpret the thing for yourself. Either way, it's fine. Either way, that's the answer. It's the Randall Cycle. There you go. So I think that's the Shawn Baker thing in a nutshell, really.
Yeah.
For me, anyway. I mean, it's to summarize, it's desperate, reductionist, agenda-driven, itinerary-driven. It's nonsense to say that because you've got a slightly elevated resting blood glucose and a slightly elevated A1C, single reading by the way, from one of the world's most highly trained athletes who happens to also be a carnivore, and then turn around and say that's evidence that the carnivore diet is bad for you and you should avoid it. Just crazy, ridiculous nonsense, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think that covers that one pretty well.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah.
What was the other? What was the next one that we want to talk about?
Next topic we were going to talk about was like calories, the intake of energy, how much is enough, how much is too much. What are your thoughts?
So I've experimented with some things. I put myself in a calorie deficit. Sometimes I get real good results. I've stalled out doing that and then had to add more to it to pull out of stalling out. I've reduced calories and then found that my gym performance is down and I can't perform as well in the gym. So I think what it comes down to is the lifestyle you want to live, what you're trying to achieve, and sometimes who you follow. Because if you listen to like Dr. Jason Fung, he talked about it's the quality of what you eat, not so much the quantity of what you eat. And I think that's where people are getting confused. I see women saying, I'm eating 1,200 calories a day because so-and-so told me to, but why are you telling me that I probably need something close to 1,700? And they just get all confused. Or men the same way. They just don't know what to eat.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, from my kind of what I've learned over the years from, being an academic and researching in the area and looking into this stuff, is that the whole concept of calories is something that is vastly, hugely misunderstood, not only by the lay public, but also by a lot of people who are involved in the industry and a lot of people who are giving people advice in terms of nutrition and things like this. We have these numbers that tell us how many calories we should eat, which are based on a number of assumptions. The assumptions being that you eat the standard American diet as per what they suggest you should eat, which, by the way, you should not be doing remotely. Reasons? Multiple reasons why you shouldn't eat the standard American diet. Reason number one, the Randall Cycle comes into play there straight away. Maybe that's something you want to look up because I'm banging on that one. There's a reason. Secondly, it assumes that a calorie is a calorie. Now, that is a fundamentally problematic assumption, assertion to make. Here's why. Let me explain this from the ground up. A calorie is a measurement of basically heat energy that is released by a sample of whatever when that particular substance is completely combusted to carbon dioxide plus water in a thing called a bomb calorimeter. So they take the sample, what's in this in terms of its energy content, they put it inside the sealed chamber, they apply heat to it until it combusts, it burns, that releases heat energy in an exothermic fashion. They measure the change in the heat energy and they go, yes, 1,700 calories in that piece of cake or whatever it is. Fantastic. Okay. Here's the issue though. What would happen if we put a lump of coal into the bomb calorimeter and apply enough heat to get the thing burning and then let it burn, it would release hundreds of thousands of calories of heat energy, because that's what a lump of coal contains. Hundreds of thousands of calories of energy. I challenge you, Richard, to get fat eating coal. It's not going to happen, is it?
No.
Same thing with sawdust, pal. I challenge you to get fat eating logs. It's not going to happen. Why not? Because you can't access the energy in the coal. You can't access the energy in the lumps of wood, because those things are not available to your metabolic system. You can't get at them. You can't break that stuff down and use it. The body is not a flame in which you burn things. The body is a metabolically active living organism that breaks down substances and rejoins them with other substances, and energy is both consumed and released at different stages and different chemical reactions, left, right, and center. It's incredibly complex. So to say that a gram of fat contains 9 calories and a gram of either protein or carbohydrates contains about 4 calories each, and that's all we need to know. Now we just need to add all them up and work out what your basal metabolic rate is, adjust for your height and weight. There you go, you need 2,000 calories, Richard. Nuts. It's reductionism again. It's like making a whole bunch of assumptions, assuming, number one, that Richard is absolutely normal, your metabolism is normal, you eat the standard American diet, and that you are going to react to protein the same way that I do, or the same way that your grandmother does or did, or whatever it is. It's not appropriate. This is not going to work for everybody. So when someone comes to you and says, I need 1,700 calories because this book told me to, okay, well, what you need to do is see how many calories there are in that book. Okay, put a match to it, is what I'm saying, because it's just ignorant nonsense. It's how are we supposed to gauge how much energy we need to take in? Well, we've covered the idea that all calories are not equal, so we can't do it by saying you need a number of calories. That's not going to work. My first question to someone is, okay, or I usually don't have to ask them, you tell by looking at them, do you have a lot of stored fat on your body? Okay, if you do, okay, then it's likely that you are intaking too many calories. It's not definite, because there are other things that can affect that, but mostly 9 times out of 10, probably even 99 times out of 100, someone that is fat, the reason for that is they are taking in too many calories. Now, there may be reasons behind that as well, like what's in the diet that's encouraging them to do that. Are they eating a standard American diet, in which case they are going to store fat? Why? Because the Randall Cycle will make sure of it. Are they eating a highly, plant-based or carbohydrate diet, in which case there's going to be an insulin issue there most likely, so that's going to cause fat storage, and it's going to leave that person chronically hungry, chronically hypoglycemic, for example. So, have a look at the individual. Are they fat? Have they got a lot of fat on their body? In which case, are they taking in too many calories? Or do we just need to change the makeup of the calories that are being taken in? Do we need to encourage that person to do what their biological design indicates they should, i.e. animal protein, animal fat, carbohydrates as low as humanly possible? Good idea. The next thing is, you find out whether that person's lean body mass is stable. Are they putting muscle on? Are they losing muscle? Are they becoming more solid, less solid? And in line with that, what are their goals? What are their training? Are they doing muscle building exercise, which will put muscle on if it's fed properly? Or indeed, are they doing a bunch of aerobic or long, slow distance type training, which will strip muscle off? Which is why you shouldn't do that, by the way, unless you are an athlete involved in a sport that requires that. If you're a marathon runner, obviously you have to train that way. But what I would suggest to marathon runners is, A, you should not be a marathon runner because it's not good for you. And that would stop you doing that kind of training. Or B, those of you who are doing a bunch of aerobics because you think it keeps you slim and keeps you, no, all that does is strip muscle mass off you, changes your muscle fiber types in a bad way towards the smaller, less powerful, less energy requiring ones. So that's going to lower your basal metabolic rate over time. And also there's some evidence that aerobic exercise will damage your heart tissue over years. So not good stuff. So in terms of, how many calories are you eating? Well, again, the best thing to do with a person is to look at the trend over time in terms of how is their body changing. And the best way to do that is to look at, let's say, a 2-component model. There are many other more accurate models of looking at modeling someone's anthropometric makeup. But a 2-component model, a 3 if you add water. Water is actually quite important, to be fair. So let's say the 3-component model where you've got water, fat, and muscle sitting on a skeleton. Okay, let's assume the skeleton isn't going to change much in an adult unless they are an older woman or indeed a much older man, or indeed anyone taking statin medications, in which case you might expect the bone mineral density to change over time. Let's ignore that for the moment and say we've got a normal, stable adult situation. So the bone mineral density is going to be about the same. The skeleton is not going to change hugely. The 3 components that will change rapidly from time to time would be how much water is stored in that person's body. Your body's 65% water, so you want to change your weight by a pound, go and have a wee. That'll do it. You want to change your weight by several pounds, dehydrate yourself. I'm not suggesting you should dehydrate yourself. It's a bad idea. But I'm saying if you want to make weight for something, and if you're fascinated about weight, that's not the point. The point is how much fat's on your body and how much muscle's on your body is what I'm getting to. So how much you should be eating, your body will feed back to you. Okay? So long as you're not doing something fundamentally foolish, like eating a standard American diet, mixing your macronutrients up. What I'm banging on about with the Randall Cycle is quite clear. What it says is don't eat a bunch of fats and a bunch of carbohydrates in your diet. Okay, what it's saying is if you mix those 2 things up, your body will think it's autumn time and your body will go into A, inflammation, and B, fat storage mode. So you're going to get fatter and you're going to be hungrier because you're not going to be able to absorb the energies into your muscles, and your metabolism is going to be turned down. That's what the Randall Cycle will do if you mix carbs and fats in your diet. And I don't just mean in one meal, I mean across your diet over time. So you need to get rid of either fats or carbohydrates insofar as that is possible in your diet, to prevent your body from thinking it's autumn time and to prevent your body from going into fat storage, inflammation, type 2 diabetes, the stuff that Western people are all suffering from left, right and centre. Now, what you then need to do is decide, well, which of those 2 things should I get rid of? The veg-tards will tell you, fat's bad for you, it'll give you heart disease, that's the thing to avoid, and all the nutrients you need are in plants, so go and do that, in which case good luck to you. Perhaps look at the video I posted the other night about oxalates that I did with the young chap Elliot Overton from the UK. Brilliant talk. If you haven't seen that, go and have a look at it. Yeah, plants basically are very, very poisonous. They're very inflammatory by way of their chemical nature, by way of their defense structures, and also by way of their deuterium makeup, if you want to look into that one.
They also spread disease a lot more too. There are so many more hundreds and thousands of diseases that they can spread that animals can't spread. That's one of the things that I'm covering right now in my pathology class, is the fact that you can get so many more diseases with plants that spread, that ruin entire crops, that'll never happen with animals and humans, and they're just so much more susceptible to disease in general. Like even the doctor that I was just talking to, I said, I really love meat, and he said it's understandable. Plants have a lot of things in them that can make you feel very uncomfortable eating them. So he said, there's more to it than what we know. And the more we research and the more we find out, we're starting to see that they're not necessarily that kosher for you, in some cases. So,
yeah, exactly. And so, basically at the end of the day, what the take home message there becomes is that, yes, The Randall Cycle is a clear metabolic pathway. It exists. It's been established. It's been shown by a chap called Randall. That's why it's called the Randall Cycle. It shows that mixing fats and carbohydrates in the diet is a very, very bad idea for us as a chronic dietary habit that we do all year round. We should not do it. Therefore, the idea is that we should have a diet which is predisposed to one or other of those macronutrients. The one which is the one that's indicated, the one that's good for you, the one that is not inflammatory, the one that is not poisonous, the one that will not kill you, is the fats. They come with the animal proteins. Oh, isn't that interesting? Looks like we're obligate carnivores after all. Looks like plants will kill us slowly and painfully. That's what I have found with my N equals 1 observation. On my 20 years on keto, I was probably it got me to sort of 75, 80, maybe 85% health at my best. It never got me there. I'm now 5.5 months into a reasonably strict carnivore diet, and my health is much more like 95, 96, 97%, except the morning after days where I cheat and have some carbs, in which case it crashes back to 65. So it's pretty clear, it's pretty obvious in my case. We need more research, obviously. We need more data, because people like to see research. They like to see this kind of science, even though science is basically nonsense. And that's coming from a scientist. People like to see it, so we need to do it. We need to do it well. We need to design it well. That's kind of where the focus is in the next few years, is to get some of the stuff out there, get it published. I'll be heavily involved in that myself, along with some of my colleagues from my former life in academia and science. We're working on that, so watch this space. Yeah, I guess in terms of the whole how many calories should you eat argument, I guess that's the answer. How long is a piece of string? The best thing to do is to watch your body. Are you getting fatter? Are you getting thinner? Are you putting on muscle? Are you taking muscle off? I wouldn't bother so much with the weighing scales, the bathroom scales. As I said, your water balance changes quite a bit, even throughout the course of one day. Your weight could change by a pound or more.
Right.
Yeah, so it's basically one of your best tools is your ichrometer. Go and look in a mirror, see how you look, and if you're not able to be objective with yourself, ask a loved one, ask your partner, ask your spouse, ask a brother or sister, ask someone that you trust. You know, get down to your bare scuddies, get in front of them or in front of a mirror, whatever's going to work for you, and say, okay, look, what's going on here? Am I getting fatter? Am I getting thinner? Am I putting on muscle? Am I taking some off? And listen to your body. So long as you're not abusing the Randall cycle by eating a standard Western diet, so long as you are on a decent ketogenic approach, or preferably a carnivore approach, because plants, even in small amounts, they are not your friend, people. They will not be helping. There is nothing in a plant, nutrient-wise, that you can't get sufficient of from an all-meat diet. There are no signs, no evidence whatsoever, no even indications that there is going to be any problem with deficiencies on a carnivore diet. I've covered things like vitamin C already on my Patreon channel, for example. That's one that the vegans like to bang on about. That the levels of minerals required and things, there's enough of all that stuff in meat. So long as you're eating nose to tail, you're eating all the organs and all that kind of stuff as well. Yeah, I think anecdotally, I think we've got this thing sussed out. We've got it nailed down. We know how this works. We understand it really well. The difficulty we're having is that we are having to wait until the science is in. We are having to do this work in the background, which, as I say, we are doing. But in the meantime, that's the argument that we're being given by the veg-tards. Is, oh, where's your evidence? So just in closing, I guess I'll give you some stuff that you can use if you get yourself into one of these discussions with some of these ideologues, shall we say. And that's this. There is almost zero data existing anywhere in the peer-reviewed published literature, anywhere in history, that concerns the outcomes of people who undertake a strictly vegan lifestyle. There's a lot of stuff available on plant-based diets, which means mostly vegan, but not entirely vegan. The blue zones that they talk about are not even mostly vegan. They are diets that have a plant base, but a significant amount of animal protein involved. For example, the Okinawans, you know, the basis of their diet actually wasn't rice at all. It was pork. You know, pork is not vegetarian or vegan, is it, boys and girls? No. Pork comes from piggies, doesn't it? So, blue zones, Okinawans live for like 100 years and they had a plant-based diet. Sure, they had a plant-based diet. Yeah. They also had a completely different lifestyle, different stresses, slightly different genetics from, you know, others. Anyway, that's that one. So when the vegetards say, you don't have any science behind you, we say, well, neither do you, Charlie Brown. Let's have a look at your science that talks about vegans. You won't find it. Why? Because it isn't there.
I think a lot of people are starting to realize that more of us doing what we do, even though we can't put it in a on a medical paper and have some kind of stamp of approval put on it or something like that, is the fact that there are so many people doing what we do that are getting the exact opposite results of what these vegetards are even telling us to do, or what we should be doing, or the doctors are saying should happen. And I think people are just getting to a point where they're tired of it. They're saying, look, I've had enough. I'm going to do what works for me. And if being on a carnivorous diet works, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm happy with. My body's happy with that. I had somebody tell me something the other day that was so important to me that I'm going to use forever. She said, I've fought you so long about being on a carnivorous diet. When I went on a carnivorous diet, it's like my body just said, thank you. I don't have to worry about anything anymore. I don't have to stress anymore. I'm just eating simple carnivorous food. And now my stress levels with my eating habit and how I was so like tied into to stressing myself out every single day about what I was going to eat. Now I just pop a good steak on the stove, or I throw it on the grill, or I might even eat it almost rare or something like that. She said, I'll throw some kidney in a skillet and I'm just as happy as can be. So there's something to it. You know, I don't care if it's posted in a medical journal, or it's a test that was done, or if it was a study that was done. I can see people in front of me by the thousands. And if that's not enough for people to wake up and say, well, we must have it wrong. Being on a vegan diet is probably the shittiest diet you can be on, but we must have it wrong. Well, second to the standard American diet.
Exactly.
And I see people thriving every single day now. So you can't, that doesn't lie. If it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, well, guess what? It's probably a duck.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. As I sort of said before, you know, the science is coming. We're doing the science that will end that part of the argument. But actually, the doing of science, the publishing of science doesn't prove anything, doesn't make anything right. It's just a process that human beings like to see done because they have their faith in science. Now, speaking as someone who was a scientist for 17 years, and for 5 years before that, even while I was training to be one, I suppose, my faith in science is gone. Okay, I have seen science bastardized. I have seen it used and abused. I've seen all the tricks. There is nothing honest. There is nothing about helping human beings in science at all. Science is about the almighty dollar at the end of the day. It's about where your funding's coming from and what's going to keep your career alive. It's not about your health, helping you or supporting you in any way, shape or form. And if you're fixated on the science, then you're in error, my friend, and it's going to come back to haunt you at some point. I think Richard's got it absolutely right. At the end of the day, things that waddle and quack are most likely to be ducks. And there is plenty of anecdotal evidence out there that the carnivorous diet is healthy and indicated. There is no evidence, or even any anecdotes particularly, of any kind of health problems being associated with the carnivorous diet. Not so with the vegan diet, is it, boys and girls? Just go and do a YouTube search on why I'm not vegan anymore and see how many videos come up. Then do the same search, why I'm not carnivorous anymore. Guess how many videos come up?
Right.
None. I wonder why. Okay. Is it because this is some great marketing regime. We've somehow managed to control YouTube. Good luck with that. I mean, if we could control YouTube, guess who'd be gone? And for more than a day at a time when he breaks the rules 3 times, you know. Did you know that YouTube had a rule, three strikes and you're out, unless you have a large channel, in which case we'll let you come back in as long as you say, sorry, I didn't mean it. Did you know that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, good stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about that another day, Richard. So I think that probably squares away a lot of the stuff that we were going to talk about in terms of this chat anyway. I'd really like to chat to you again. I think that you're a fantastic resource for people. I think that your practical approach, your actual experience with dealing with this in the real world, away from the white coats and the science and the nonsense that they put out there, I think is invaluable. I think all my people, if you aren't already subbed to Richard's channel, The Keto Mechanic, get yourselves over there and get yourself subbed today to Richard's channel as well. He's an absolutely outstanding resource in terms of practical advice for people that want to undertake ketogenesis, ketogenic diets, carnivorous diets, that kind of stuff. He really does know his stuff from a standpoint of, you know, Richard's background is military, and also it's mechanical in terms of he's a mechanic. So the way his brain works is, how does this shit work? What drives this gear? Why does this happen? And he will trace this stuff back for you in a practical, sensible way. And he'll do that in a disciplined way, because that's his whole background. So I would highly, highly recommend people A, sub to his channel, and B, you know, if you want some consults in the area of, you know, what's good on the carnivorous diet and stuff, yeah, absolutely, you know, Richard would be a good man to go to for that. So that's my plug there for you on that. I've really enjoyed this chat. I hope you have too, Richard. I know I've done most of the talking, but, you know, that's kind of my personality a bit. You know, any sort of closing comments that I'll give you the last word, basically. What do you want to say before we close out?
No, I just want to say thanks for doing this. You know, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I really appreciate you plugging me, and I appreciate what you do too. People need to know that there's good, honest information out there, and there are people that are willing to do the work, but sometimes it's difficult to take all of your time and just devote it freely. Sometimes you have to go to somebody's Patreon to get the work that I just started my Patreon, and I find that I want to take that extra time to explain things, but sometimes I just can't do it because my life is valuable as well. And that few extra bucks sometimes does help explaining things, and taking the extra time at 1 o'clock in the morning to respond back to somebody or whatever when I'm in the middle of my sleep, or I'm taken away from my family's time or something like that. So I appreciate what you do, and people need to know that you have a Patreon as well, where you cover a plethora of things. So what is your Patreon? What is the name of it?
It's http :/Patreon patreon.com/Bart BART_K, which is KAY. So it's just Bart_K, basically. Easy to find it. We'll probably also link it down there, and also when we close off here, Richard, before we finish our little chat offline, I'll grab your Patreon address and your channel address and everything, and we'll make sure that's linked down underneath here as well, so that people can find that stuff easily.
Sounds good.
Cool bananas. All right, I appreciate you, Richard. I do appreciate your time today. As I say, I've enjoyed it greatly. It's always good to get a practical perspective, and nice to know that there are other people out there in the world who feel the way I feel about things, who understand things the way I do. It's been great, and we will do this again, I'm sure, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Catch you later.